questions that I begun to ask myself was, okay, God, what do you want me to learn in this season? That became my new question. It wasn't always my question. I used to kick and scream and kind of act like a spoiled brat before. Like, why me? This is fair. I've been through this, right. Woe is me type of mentality. Want to, pity myself and, want people to feel sorry for me and stuff like that. Like, I've been in those places just like many of us have. But my response started to be, okay, what am I supposed to learn in this season? And then when I can focus on that, then I can carry that lesson with me into the next season, into the next season, into the next season.
Yes.
And that's how you grow.
Yeah. I'm extremely passionate about helping corporate professionals transition into entrepreneurship. So I had to share the number one thing that helped me develop as an entrepreneur, and that's the morning meetup. I joined the morning meetup specifically for the structure because I'm leaving corporate America, so I'm used to those morning huddles. We got our sales, we know what our goals are, and we get our day started. So I was missing that for 2 years before I even found the morning meetup. Now, the second thing that I really, really benefited from was the revenue generating activities was not necessarily a thing before 2021. Now, I had my LLC, I had my website, I had a few clients here and there, but the momentum really took off as soon as I got around like-minded individuals and people who really knew the struggles that I was already dealing with, that I could get over my fear of sales and communicating my value and putting myself out there on social media. The friends that I've developed, the mentors and the mentees that I've created relationships with, everything has really created this environment for us to thrive as entrepreneurs. So if you want to develop as an entrepreneur, you're leaving corporate America and you're trying to figure out how do I get my footing in entrepreneurship, then the morning meetup will definitely be a game changer for you. You can learn with us, you can grow with us. And I didn't even mention that we have a book club. Join us in the community. Let's get started today. You will not regret it. Welcome to the Work and Play Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Work and Play Podcast. I'm your host, Ariel Young, and I have the fabulous Dr. Campbell here with me. How are you?
I'm well. I'm blessed. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So one thing I want to do to set the tone is Dr. Campbell and I actually met through a mutual friend of ours who I met during my phase or my awakening in community engagement. And so because of that mentorship that I've developed, and actually you guys are going to meet him, so we might actually, you'll see. But that mentorship, that community engagement, that impact, I can totally hear it, and I can't wait for it to come out on the screen. But without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Dr. Martin Luther Campbell. I am a internal medicine resident at one of the local hospitals here in Atlanta, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to tell my story. Happy to provide some inspiration, hopefully, and kind of see where this goes.
Martin Luther Campbell. That sounds very familiar. How did you get your name?
Well, I actually got the name from my dad. My father is, he actually was a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fanatic. He would always recite the speeches from memory. He educated my brothers and I about Dr. King's journey. And growing up in the Midwest, where, blacks are not the majority, like it is in some places in the South, and that they don't really teach really in-depth black history. It was really important that kind of came from the home. And so I always hear stories about how, I was the last boy and my mom had named my two older brothers, and my dad was like, no, I'm gonna name this one. And my dad said that he paced the hospital floor and he was thinking, and he said, you know what, I know what I'm gonna name him. I'm gonna name him Martin Luther King. But the doctors told him that that King is not our last name, so that way he can't just name me, throw King on my last name. So then he just settled and was like, all right, we'll name him Martin Luther Campbell, and we'll go from there.
Okay, it still flows though. I didn't know you couldn't just take a last name. Sounds feasible to me.
Right. I don't know how it was back then, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I appreciate you giving us some background and some foundation. I can even say growing up in the South, I would say we didn't get as much black history as I would say we needed. But you definitely walk with that air of knowing who you are and whose you are. Mm-hmm. So before we get too deep into your background, how did you get into the medical field?
Yes. So it's funny because When I was in high school, I was actually on the business magnet. So we had magnets in our high school. They were trying to make it more college-like and, to try to prepare us for college. So they had these magnets, and I was in the business, finance, entrepreneurship magnet. And so I thought I was going to be some type of some type of corporate guy. And so I walk around with suits and stuff like that, and they taught us how to talk to people and how to conduct meetings and how to, brainstorm and all these different things. But there was one teacher in particular who was over my biology class, and she made it so much fun. Like I fell in love with it. I was like, wow, this stuff is like really cool to learn about the human body, to learn about nature, to learn about cells, to learn about organelles and how these things work. And I thought that stuff was just so cool because she made it so fun. And that was kind of like my first interest to kind of, hey, maybe I want to do medicine versus this business thing. And then I ended up being good in math, ended up being good at science, and then it just kind of came together. But actually, when I think about it a little bit more, I think my experience with falling in love with medicine kind of came a little bit before that when I was younger. My mom actually worked at Children's Hospital in Minneapolis as one of their cafeteria cooks. And so she didn't always have money for, to pay for babysitters or for somebody to watch us or family members or what have you. So sometimes I would tag along with her to work. And when I would go along with her to work, I would hang out in the cafeteria, I would color, I would do kid stuff or what have you. But I would always see these people who come down to the cafeteria in white coats and scrubs and stuff like that, nurses and doctors, and even sometimes like the sick kids in wheelchairs and different things like that. And so I always had great memories associated with the hospital. And so I think subconsciously, that was kind of instilled in me at an early age. That like, hey, I like being in the hospital. And so that combined with my biology experiences in high school, kind of like bloomed into this career in medicine, I guess. Yeah,
they always say if you have a good teacher, the only reason that you're bad in a class is because you don't have a good enough teacher to teach it to you. Absolutely. And I truly believe that.
I believe that too. So shout out to the teachers out there.
Right. Do you remember her name? We can give her.
Yes, her name is Miss Holly Siasoko.
Miss Holly Siasoko. That's dope. Yeah, because my experience in biology was actually the worst. I had to cut the little frog open anyway, so it was just not it. So you developed this kind of exposure. It was exposure to the medical field that got you interested subconsciously. And then how did you, from there, you were in a magnet business program. How did you curate your experiences from high school to get into college?
Yeah, it was weird. Because at first I was like, all right, business. But then I was like, well, I'm actually going to major in biology now, biology pre-med. So I was getting a lot of offers from a lot of different schools. There was a possibility of me playing football. Actually, I was being recruited for football. I was okay in it, but if you're decent at football and you got a 4.0 GPA, then they're gonna try to recruit you. So I thought I was gonna play football.
What was your position? Because you got the whole.
I played several positions because our high school team wasn't that good. But ultimately, I played like middle linebacker, defensive end, and then I played some offensive line as well. So.
I got you. You probably one of the two black men. They're like, oh, put Martin here. We got him. He's gonna do whatever we need him to do.
Yeah, big facts. They was like, you play offensive side of the ball, you play defensive side of the ball. But yeah.
Okay.
I've been playing special teams. I never came off the field.
I got you.
Wasn't all that good, but I was out there.
Yeah, see, they didn't want you to specialize in it. That's why we went into cardiology, which is way better specialization, if you ask me. So pre-med, and I even said this to you, when I was in college, the one deciding factor, if you were gonna keep going down that path of being a doctor, was OChem.
Yes.
So, what helped you get through your pre-med education?
Yeah, I think community. Being at Morehouse College, we had so much community. People didn't just let you fall through the cracks or anything like that. You had your group of friends that you study with, and everything like that. And so that kind of helped me to push, to keep going. I remember them OChem days. I remember OChem 1 and OChem 2. I was on a struggle bus, just to keep it real, cramming for them tests, pulling all-nighters, all that type of stuff. All that stuff was difficult, but I think I think just having a good group of friends, you know, I think being at a HBCU actually helped me as well. Maybe if I was at a PWI, I'm not sure, I can't speak because I wasn't at a PWI, but if I was there, maybe I wouldn't have felt or have had the confidence to persevere through something like that. But being at Morehouse College, like they instill confidence in you. They instill work ethic in you. I had professors calling me into their office when they felt like I wasn't taking the class seriously. Morehouse College had a policy where if you had 3 unexcused absences, they could drop you a letter grade. Other big schools, you know, with 300 people in the classroom, they don't even notice that you're not there. And if you don't show up, that has nothing to do with them. Like, they still got your tuition at the end of the day. But I think being in that type of nurturing environment, you know, helped me to stay grounded, helped me to keep going. So.
Got it. What do you feel like is the one thing that reminds you now that you're in this world of being a doctor that takes you always back to that structure, dare I say it, like at Morehouse?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, I can't explain it. It's like you have to experience it. And I'm not trying to, like, you know, sell or advertise for Morehouse College, but it's just something about when you're around other like-minded black men who are highly educated and highly motivated, when you're in that type of environment of someone who looks like you and you see success all around you, it becomes the norm, it becomes the expectation, and so you don't know anything different. So I honestly, I just don't know how to be anything different. It just kind of comes with the territory. I really don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I can feel it. And I went to a PWI, so I automatically recognize that level of confidence that a person has when they come into the workplace, when they come from an HBCU. It's like we have the same exact information in our mind, but that stature, like you can't take that away. So I can only imagine like the different experiences, like you've mentioned, your teachers actually calling you into the office when you fall short. Like 400 students in the classroom and my finance, you know, professor asking me for something. So as a black man, you're, like you said, it's a feeling, right? And you kind of just have this like knowledge about who you are. But then you decide to go even further into the medical program, which once you start to go out of like the Morehouse era, you're now in a space where you're one of a fraction of the team. So how did that transition work for you?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that, because I do really want to highlight this as well. So I didn't have a straight route from undergrad to med school. Some people go to, you know, undergrad for 4 years, you know, they take their MCAT, which is the medical college admissions test, and they go straight in the following year. That wasn't my experience. I ended up having a child when I was in undergrad. And so my pathway was a little bit different. On top of that, my maturity level wasn't where it needed to be. And I was very fearful of taking the MCAT. And so I pushed and I delayed, I pushed and I delayed until graduation came, and I looked around and I'm like, yo, what am I gonna do? Like, I know I wanna be a doctor. I haven't taken my MCAT yet. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. Like, what am I gonna do? At that time, my roommate, Paul, he was off to go work on Wall Street and stuff like that. And I was in an apartment by myself, like, yo, like, what am I gonna do? So ultimately, I ended up having 4 gap years between undergrad and before I got accepted to medical school. Okay. So I ended up moving to Texas. And when I moved to Texas, I started working a couple of jobs. I was doing unpaid research at that time, which I knew that if I continue to, I guess, have experiences that can somehow translate to medicine, then when I apply for medical school, it won't be like wasted time, because I already knew all the admissions folks are gonna be like, okay, well, you weren't in school this time. What were you doing? So you have to keep yourself, you have to find things to do to gain valuable experience to make sure that you're an attractive applicant when it comes to medicine and stuff like that. And so I did unpaid research at Texas A&M. And so my first paid job was actually working at a call center, making $10 an hour. And it took me forever to find that job, because you got to keep in mind, I graduated 2012, so this was right in the, you know, right around the recession and everything like that. And so it was very hard to find a job. I did graduate Morehouse with honors. I was a biology major. I was well educated, well spoken. However, I still had a very hard time finding a job anywhere.
Yeah.
It was really tough that year. Like, it was almost impossible to find a job.
Was it a call center in a hospital or a medical field?
No, it was a call, and it was actually somewhat business related.
Okay.
So it was a call center at a place where I won't say their name, but what they do is that they kind of act as they kind of carry out the transactions of selling stocks for stockholders.
Okay.
Basically. So during that time, I learned a little bit about stocks and stuff like that. Still kind of somehow connecting to the business realm of things. But at that job, to be honest, y'all, I was miserable. Every day I woke up, it was a struggle. Because number one, I wasn't living my dream. Mm-hmm. And then number two, I was trying to support myself and financially support my daughter, who wasn't living with me at the time, all on $10 an hour. Like, it was like nearly impossible. So I was very miserable, and those were some depressing times. But ultimately, I ended up applying to medical school. I ended up taking the MCAT. Didn't do so hot my first time around. I still applied to medical school. I got one interview, and that was Morehouse School of Medicine here in Atlanta.
Okay.
Went on the interview. Everything went beautiful. I thought all the stars were aligning, and then I didn't hear nothing back. I got waitlisted. And then after I got waitlisted, like right at the last minute, like into April, into June, they told me, oh, you didn't get in. So I was crushed. I was like, dang, I did all this studying. It's been like 2 years. I got friends who are in medical school and dental school and on Wall Street doing everything like that. And I felt like I was stuck. And that was a really difficult place.
Were you doing all of this by yourself? Like, you just were like doing the tests and working by yourself and applying and just hoping and praying? Were you like talking to anyone? Was anyone helping you along this journey?
Yeah, I had friends with me who were helping me, who were encouraging me. I ended up also finding like another job in College Station. So when I left the call center, I ended up having another job where somebody took a chance on me at a hospital that they had just built in the city. And I was like, I have no experience in this area whatsoever, but I want to be a doctor one day. And that person was like, all right, I'll give you a shot.
Okay.
And so they gave me a shot. I was working at the hospital, what we call a clinical lab technician. And so what they do is they draw blood from the patients who are in the hospital. They take the samples down to the lab, they run tests on them, and report the results, and then that's how the doctors get their results for all their tests and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I did that. And so I met people during that experience. I actually met 2 other black men. I met one black man who was a nurse, but then he ended up getting accepted to pharmacy school, and now he's a PharmD. So he's a doctor. And then another gentleman who was a traveling nurse who's working there as well. And then we were all 3. It was kind of weird because it was like we were like the 3 black men in this kind of like rural country college town in Texas somewhere. But we're very educated, and we kind of supported each other through that as well.
Yeah. The top 3 responses that I get when I ask, why do you want to leave corporate America, are that you want financial freedom, you want to own your own time, and you want to build a legacy for this generation and generations to come. Now, this is not a solo job. In order to transition from your 9 to 5 into entrepreneurship, it's going to take community and it's going to take resources. And I've created the community of pioneers who are going to wrap around you and help you make that transition successfully. So if you're interested in leaving your job, go ahead and click that information below. Let's get into the community and let's transition from your 9 to 5 into entrepreneurship successfully. Now let's get back to the episode.
And then I also have my church family down there, and it was at this church actually that I met the woman who is my wife now. And so there were a lot of different moving parts at that time. And so also having her support as well, she actually bought me my first stethoscope that I actually used and I still have to this day. And now my youngest daughter, who's 2 years old, walks around, plays with the stethoscope and pretends to be a doctor. Who would have seen that? Like, you know what I mean? Like 8 years ago. You see what I mean? So like everything kind of came full circle.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So the first round of applying didn't necessarily go right. So so I'm assuming this parlay in this hospital is what made you look a little bit better as a candidate.
It made me look better. So I had some of that experience on there.
Okay.
So that made me look better. But then I also ended up getting another job. So it is a lot. So I got another job at this diagnostic lab where I was doing analytical chemistry. In other words, it was like an OChem lab, but we were doing it where we were taking animal samples and we were giving the customers their results, for pay, basically. So we were doing all this like nerdy, like laboratory type stuff. And I ended up excelling in that area as well. Also had my bosses there who really believed in me as well. I actually developed one of the testing methods to test basically vitamins E and A in serum and in tissue in horses. So I developed that there. And so those experiences, along with retaking the MCAT, during this time, the MCAT changed. The MCAT used to be out of 45 points, and it used to cover these topics. Then there was a transition period where they switched over to where it was like out of 530 or 540 points, and they had different topics. And so I was right at that transition period. And so I took the new MCAT the following year after I didn't get in. Then I went to my interview once again. This time I only applied to one school because I knew where I wanted to be from last year, and that was Morehouse School of Medicine. And so I applied there, flew out here. It was January. I remember it like it was yesterday. Ended up being an ice, whatever, like ice apocalypse or something like that down here. So they ended up cutting our interviews short. They cut our tour short and everything. I'm like, dang, how this gonna happen on my interview day, on my second go around?
Yeah. So
once again, I got waitlisted. However, during that time, I was praying. I was talking to God. I was in the Bible every day. I was really leaning on Him to get me through this, and I really felt like God was telling me like it was gonna happen. Like this was the time it was gonna happen. This is my time. So I actually talked to my wife about it. I was like, babe, I feel like this is gonna manifest. It's gonna happen this time. I was having dreams about being in medical school. I was having dreams about, I guess like the selection committee, like, going through my applications, all these different things that God was showing me. And so I took a leap of faith. And so I talked to my wife about it. I was like, babe, we need to start saving up money because I feel like this is gonna happen. I had heard stories previously about people being accepted to med school like 3 weeks, 2 weeks before orientation started because somebody dropped out and a spot opened up.
Yeah.
So my mentality was we need to stay ready just in case. But once again, Morehouse is in Atlanta and I was living in Texas. So keep that in mind. And we had kids and stuff like that. So this is what happened, y'all. So what I did was I told my wife about it. I was like, babe, is it okay if we, just get ready and just like move to Atlanta and kind of, take a leap of faith?
What?
Like, is it okay? And she was like, I trust what God is saying through you. It's just like, go for it. Do what you need to do. So what I did was I went to my 2 jobs and I put in my 2 weeks notice, right? I put in my 2 weeks notice. This is like June. So for y'all that don't know, medical school year starts like July 1 and it goes from July to July.
Okay.
So it's not your regular year that goes from January to December. It's a July to July type of thing. This was July and I haven't heard nothing yet. Okay.
So it was like somebody would have like, if it ain't happened now, it's not happening.
Exactly. And usually they like try to tell you by at least like April, May.
Yeah.
So I still haven't heard nothing, but I haven't heard a no yet either. I just heard I was waitlisted. So still going off faith, I went ahead, I put in my 2 weeks notices at both of my jobs. I went in the office, I was like, look, this is what's going on. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. I put in my 2 weeks notice on Friday. Next Friday, I come to work. I'm running samples in the lab, listening to music, whatever, just running my samples, doing my job. I get a phone call from a 404 area code. I was like, who would be calling me from 404? I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, Martin, you idiot. Like, Atlanta, fool. Like, pick up the phone. So I was like, oh, snap. So I picked up the phone And next thing you know, it's one of like the directors over the admissions at Morehouse said, Martin Luther Campbell, she said, we would love to have you join our class. And I was like, what? And I was like, hold on. Like I gotta leave real quick. I was like, oh, you mind if I put you on hold? She was like, yeah, that's fine. So I put her on hold real quick. I got up out of the lab. I went outside and I just like finished the conversation. And she was kind of telling me the next steps, like, oh, you know, we're gonna send this in the mail. Make sure you sign your contract. Make sure you do this. Make sure you do that. We'll do what? Dizzy to what you can expect. I'm gonna send you a follow-up email, all this other stuff. And when I got off that phone, I kid y'all not, I'm not the kind of dude that really cry like that. But I cried. I cried. And I praise God because looking at everything I done been through, like all the ups and downs, all the left turns, right turns, like, you know, everything, all of the winding roads, everything I had been through, like I had finally got to a point where like now like my dream was gonna come true. And it was so hard during those years when I felt like I was stagnant and all my other friends, and I was happy for them, but they were living their dreams. I just felt like I was stuck. And so it felt like I wasn't really living. It felt like I was just, you know, going day to day. I was just there. But yeah, so God made it happen. And from that point forward, I got that phone call 3 weeks before orientation started. But thankfully, because of my wife and I's obedience to what God was telling us, we already had money saved up and we had already had plans. And so it made the transition that much easier, because what if that happened and then we didn't make the preparations? Then it would have been a struggle, but it wasn't a struggle. It was a smooth transition. So we got the U-Hauls and stuff like that. We packed up. And on 2 hours of sleep, we drove 16 hours to Atlanta. We moved our whole family to Atlanta, and I was right there on time early on day one.
Ready to go. And that ultimately led to me being where I am now. Wow. That's amazing. I think the power of like you basically, so I don't get very biblical, but when it comes to stories like these, I always think of Abraham. And he walked to the top of the mountain, not even knowing what was on the other side of it. You quit your job. You were already in motion. Like car was about to be ready anyway. And he was like, okay, here you go. But I think if it hadn't been for those steps that you had already taken, who knows what the story would look like, right? You would have been scrambling on the first day of medical school, and that just would have been a whole nother story, but that's not your story. So I always think of that when I think of the, like transitions, when we prepare for whatever God has for us. I think that's the most like, whew, thank you for sharing that. So, and we're only halfway through because you had prepared yourself for a life in medical school, but getting accepted, I would imagine, is the easy part.
It's just the first step.
So what was it like? If you could explain, like, you know, for someone who hasn't been in medical school, they may be just about to get into medical school. What was it? Anything that you expected, or did you experience things that you just, you know, never would have expected or couldn't have even prepared for?
That's a very good question. So there's a lot of different elements to medical school, and different medical schools may do things differently, but for the most part, like, you know, you're going to get the same type of education. So the first 2 years of medical school are what we call the preclinical years. And that's a lot of textbook stuff, like just getting your foundational knowledge right. That's your knowledge in biochemistry, physiology, things like that. Pathology, things like that. Basically, how the body is supposed to work, and then what happens when the body doesn't work the way it's supposed to. That's basically what that means. And then your last 2 years, your third and fourth year, are what you call your clinical years. That's when you actually get in hospital experience. You're actually part of a team where you're the med student on the team. You're learning, you're taking care of patients, you're getting hands-on experience. So I will say that those 4 years of not being in school actually helped me in particular to thrive and do a little bit better during my first 2 years of medical school. Why? Because during those 4 years that I had off, I was studying for the MCAT. I had to study for it twice, right? Because I took it twice, but I was studying for it on my own. So during that time, I had no distractions. I was just studying on my own. and I learned how to study and how to effectively study according to my learning style. And that was something that's important, because a lot of times in medical school, when you first start out, people are just learning how to study. Because when you're an undergrad, that studying that you're doing, that's not studying.
No.
And you don't know that until you have something that's a little more difficult that you can go back and compare it to and be like, yo, like, okay, well, that studying I was doing, when you just reading the book, you just highlighting, you just memorizing for the exam, and then you dump it all out, you brain dump, what I call, like, that's not real studying. And so, so a lot of times people are spending hours and hours and semesters just like learning how to study for them and how to be efficient, because you only got a certain amount of time in a day. So basically, other people will equate going to medical school like trying to drink water from a fire hose. It's like, you might drown, you know what I mean? So it's a lot of information to take in at once. And then how do you retain that information? And then later, how do you apply that information? And then how do you tweak that information to what we call the art of medicine? Because medicine is really an art, to deliver effective care to your patients. So it's really difficult. So the fact that I already had 4 years by myself studying, like knowing what works for me, I knew I like flashcards. I knew I'm a visual person, so I knew what worked for me. So when I applied that right away, I actually really didn't struggle that much in medical school because of a lot of the challenges that I went through before. So keep that in mind. Like it may feel like, your challenges are unfair, but it's preparing you for your future, and you just have no idea what it's preparing you for.
Yeah, I have a mentee all the time, actually from when Paul and I were doing the career readiness program, and he always asked me, Miss Ari, I'm like, I am not Miss Ari, but anyway, he's like, why is life unfair? But the answer is always, it's preparing you for your next level. I don't know what your next level is going to be, but I just know that you're going to be fine when you get there. And so that's literally what you're explaining. And I think anyone who is going through any test and trial just needs to ask, not even why is this happening to me? You might even just say, what blessing am I about to receive after this? Because it's always going to be a blessing, especially if you got your mind all right.
Absolutely. And I think the other question too is, whenever you're going through something difficult or even something great, because I feel like you learn from challenges, but I think we can learn from the good things as well, but sometimes we're so busy enjoying the good things that we're not looking for an opportunity to learn. You should be learning in every season of your life,
right?
Because life is the best teacher. But even in those trials and those difficult times, questions that I begun to ask myself was, okay, God, what do you want me to learn in this season? That became my new question. It wasn't always my question. I used to kick and scream and kind of act like a spoiled brat before. Like, why me? This is fair. I've been through this,
Right.
Woe is me type of mentality. Want to, pity myself and, want people to feel sorry for me and stuff like that. Like, I've been in those places just like many of us have. But my response started to be, okay, what am I supposed to learn in this season? And then when I can focus on that, then I can carry that lesson with me into the next season, into the next season.
Yes.
And that's how you grow.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching the Work and Play podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Boss Up Conference, which is a community for entrepreneurs, CEOs, celebrities, and corporate executives to come together, network, and solve some problems. Thank y'all so much for being supporters of the Work and Play podcast. And thank you for watching the Work and Play podcast and all the episodes before. Now let's get back to the episode. And now that you're grown, I think anytime the next situation that you go through, remember that, because it's going to be, the more we get older, I think that the less whining we have. So one thing, I always talk to people who are either doctors or in medical school, and the reason for going into the medical field could just be because, like, my family said so, or this is the prestigious route. But very rarely do I get to meet someone who's kind of passionate about the field, and I can feel that from you. But I'm like, where did that passion come for the medical field? Like, when did you start being passionate to help people like that?
That's a good point. Kind of going back to, like I said before, like seeing my mom's in Children's Hospital and being in that environment kind of started me off. But what I also didn't tell you guys, because I would be here for hours and hours telling you all the details of my journey. But I was going through my own health issues during that same time when I was in Texas and I was working at a call center job I didn't like, and then I was transitioning, and then I got married, and then all these different things, like I was going through my own physical, and mental struggles during that time. And I remember one time in particular where like I didn't have health insurance. I had a lot of medical debt from going to the ERs, multiple times. And one time in particular, I remember I wasn't feeling good, so I was trying to go to an urgent care place. And I remember that they asked me, they were saying that, well, you don't have insurance, so you have to pay 100% or close to 100% of the visit up front. And I think all I had in my pocket was like my rent money. And they wanted it was like $300 or something, like $300 to $400 or something like that. And that was literally all I had, and my rent was due like the next day. And they basically turned me away. And I went back in the car in my parking lot and I just cried. I cried because I was like, yo, I literally had to make a decision between like my health and keeping a roof over my head. And nobody, not in a country as what these United States should ever have to make that decision. It was that moment where they basically turned me away because of my inability to pay to see a doctor, that I went back in the car in the parking lot and I sat there and I cried because I had to literally decide between having a roof over my head and for getting the medical care that I needed. And nobody should ever have to make that decision, especially in a country as wealthy as the United States. Like that should never have to come down to, do I eat versus do I get my medicines, or do I have a roof over my head versus do I get my medicines, or like it should never have to come down to that. There's too much wealth and prosperity in this country for that to be the case. But unfortunately, many patients face that example. So I always kept that with me. And then also when I was here in Atlanta, and I was here as an undergraduate student, though Atlanta has been the single most place where I've ever seen, this amount of Black success and actual real Black middle class, which they don't really have in Minneapolis like that, there's so much poverty in Atlanta. And there's a large homeless population.
Right.
And that's very close to my heart, because even my brother, who struggled with mental health issues, he was living out on the streets at one point in time by choice. And I think about how he was mistreated and things like that. And so the homeless population I have a very soft spot for. And so those type of communities, and myself not ever seeing a Black physician when I grew up, like those things all together is kind of what drives my passion to be at a place like, Grady and in Atlanta, serving the very same community that I kind of grew up in. And so that's where my passion comes from. Yeah,
that's a passion. That's a passion. That's like a deep-rooted, socially aware passion, not just like, oh, I like blood passion. Right, yeah. That's beautiful. And there's so much to get into with that. So with what I'm trying to connect is your current specialization in cardiology, right? With this severe seed of social awareness that was planted in you clearly from a very probably as an embryo, right? And how it's come to be. So the passion is not particularly for the heart. It sounds like it's like what says I need to specialize in cardiology. Oh,
okay, that's a whole nother thing. So cardiology in particular, where I love it because it makes sense. Okay. It's not just memorization, but if you look at it from a conceptual standpoint, once you understand kind of the basic things of how the heart works, then it makes sense. And so I like things that make sense. Okay. The other thing too, if you think about cardiovascular disease in the Black community, we are most disproportionately affected when it comes to that. Cardiovascular disease includes heart attacks, strokes, heart failure. And basically, once you have issues with your heart, it could pretty much affect any part of your body. A lot of times your kidneys are affected, other portions. And so diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, all those things contribute to cardiovascular disease. And who's more affected by that in this country than we are? How many family members have you had that, they had a stroke? Yeah. I've seen so many Black men with strokes at age like before they're even 50 years old. And they were once the primary breadwinner for their family, but now their family has the burden of having to take care of them. And they're, you know, not able to do for themselves like they need to. Why? Think about how come when you go to heavily populated Black communities, you don't see a grocery store with fresh vegetables and fruits. What you see is liquor store, you see the convenience store, and you see chicken spots, right? Like, and you see fast food joints like McDonald's and stuff like that everywhere. Like, why do you think that is? Like, those things didn't get there by accident. And what's the result of that? We're dying off at very alarming rates, not only because of cardiovascular disease. That's one issue, but like, we can even go into the pandemic. We could talk about prostate cancer. We could talk about colon cancer. Like, all of that stuff, you know, hits us worse than anybody else. And so seeing how that has affected our community, and being that it sparks my interest just from my knowledge and kind of like a scientific, you know, kind of curiosity for me. That's why I like cardiovascular disease.
That makes sense. Okay, so my next curiosity. So I know you're also interested in the business side of the medical field, right? And from the outside world, right, the business side of the medical field almost contributes to some of these issues that you're talking about. But because I know you're passionate about helping the Black community understanding cardiovascular diseases so that you can fix them, and because the heart is easy to figure out with the pathways, now you're taking me back to biology. When you think about a solution, right, and I know that this is going to come from both your awareness about the business and the administrative side of the hospital, but also your awareness as a Black man. When you think about a solution, what is a feasible intersection between like profitable hospital business and educating Black people, if those are even the two variables that that should be intersected?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm not an expert in the hospital administrative side and how to run that portion of it.
Or just spitballing.
But just kind of from my initial thoughts, there are, first of all, well, because I don't want to kind of become a political thing, but being that healthcare and the idea of universal healthcare is a political platform for some people, or a political enemy for other people, it ends up becoming kind of like this kind of political gray area.
Right.
But, you know, ultimately, I think that if you can make a hospital more efficient, there are a lot of wasteful things that happen in a hospital every single day. There are a lot of services for which, you know, services or supplies or medications are purely just overpriced. So it doesn't have to be that way. And then also there are hospitals that literally turn people away because of their insurance status. And so my mindset was, I remember how it was for me not to have health insurance. I would like to open up, you know, a clinic, or maybe even be on the administrative side of a hospital that actually serves a community where they don't turn people away because of their lack of insurance. And so that ends up being part of the solution to me as well. Exactly how do you accomplish that? As far as like all the nitty gritty, I have some ideas. I don't know those specifically, but I do think that, you know, if you have more people who are doctors and you have more people who are of color on those executive boards who are VPs of hospitals, who can advocate for the communities that they come from, then some of these changes can take place. Also, too, the VPs and the people who are at the tops of these hospitals and organizations, do they have to take such a big portion of the revenue in their pocket for their own personal reasons, or can they feed that back into the community? And so there are a lot of different ways that you can still be profitable. Okay, you can still take care of the community and you can still keep the lights on at the hospital. It's just, are people willing, you know, to do what they need to do in order to make that happen? Or do people enjoy their lifestyle and their comfort, and as long as it doesn't affect them or affect the people that look like them, then they don't care? So, you know, I think by, you know, bringing more people to the table who look like these communities who are affected, I think that helps a lot as well. So
Yeah.
those are just some of my thoughts.
Those are great thoughts. And as you develop your leadership in the medical field, and as you get more and more opportunity to sit at the table, I totally can't wait to see some of these changes that you're able to make and keeping that mindset. Something that Richard Pryor said, of course, before he passed away, was just as we work up a certain system, you know, we go in with like these ideals, and then by the time we get to that level, we like forget all the reasons why we even started. So I would wish you and pray that you keep that solidness. You have your support system, you have your wife, you have your church community and your village to keep you grounded. So my only prayer is that when you get there, you actually can do some change, because I think you're right. It's up to the people who are in charge to make those like decisions, which seem like hard decisions now, but how much does fund actually, you know, cost? And then being able to put that back into the community, because that is your community. And right now there's no one in there who's a part of the community to care. So I 100% love the vision. So keep going, and we could spitball too. I'm such, this is my lane.
Absolutely.
So as we think about, like, you know, leaders who are currently there and what enjoyment might look like for them, what does enjoyment in the medical field look like for you? Like I only imagine when you were in the lab and you listening to your music when the call came in, that's what, you know, that's what enjoyment looked like then. But what does enjoyment look like for you now?
Enjoyment looks like just, I'm a people, you know, I'm a social butterfly. I like to talk. I like to learn about people's backgrounds and just like share moments with people. So what's enjoyable for me is actually talking to my patients, learning about their stories, helping them, figuring out what their barriers are that kind of keep them from living the most healthy life that they can live, and then trying to meet them where they are. Like I literally get enjoyment out of that. I get enjoyment out of interacting with my co-residents and my co-workers and my attending physicians. I just enjoy just healing people and helping people. Why? Because I have all of this in the context of where I was. And what that produces is an overwhelming feeling of gratitude and appreciation. Can you imagine all of the things that had to go right for a black boy who was born in Gary, Indiana, right? Whose father was incarcerated early on, and whose mom was a single mother for a period of time, and whose brother struggled with mental illness, and who nobody in my immediate family had a high school diploma, to have all the different challenges that a lot of other black men and women experience from growing up in the inner city, whether it's gang influence, whether it's lack of seeing people who look like you succeed, or understanding what a black middle class is, or anything like that, to go through everything that I went through, to make it to college, to come down here, to not really have a full plan, to have a child in college, to move to Texas, to not have a full plan, to work at a dead-end job at that time, new opportunities open up, get married, you know, go deeper in my relationship with God, have kids, take a leap of faith, come back, get in med school, succeed in med school, went through other challenges that, you know, we didn't get to talk about, all the way to this point now. You have to think of like, and then now seeing my kids are getting older and that they don't know anything different but this black success. Can you imagine the thankfulness and the joy that I get to experience on a daily? Just having the perspective of where I'm at now and where I come from. And not only that, going deeper than that, than where my ancestors came from. So that's why I go into work every day with a smile. It's not because everything is perfect, but it's because I have perspective. And I'm thankful. So yeah.
You just tie that all the way up. But I am curious what it's like to be a young father. Hey Hey guys, it's Ariel from the Work and Play podcast. If you're getting any value from this channel, and I mean anything from the tutorials to the podcast to the random videos that you see on this channel, then I just ask that you do one thing. Please subscribe. Subscribe and share this to anyone that you think this resonates with, and drop a comment below so I know what other things that you want to see next. Now let's get back to the episode. Coming into his next level of residency, and managing like both husband, father, doctor, all in the same body, plus more man of God.
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm not perfect by any means. I make a lot of mistakes daily.
Yeah.
In fatherhood, in husbandhood, I make mistakes. In friendships, even in medicine. But I think just understanding that this is all a calling. Understanding that it's not about me. Even though sometimes I like to think it is. But I think just understanding that this is all bigger than me, and like this is not the end, you know what I mean? And like that gives me a peace, and it gives me the strength to kind of carry on. I've always been the type of person that I won't say I've always been, but I've come to be a person that kind of strive with the more responsibility that I have. Because if I don't have a lot of responsibility, then that means it's just really just me. And I don't have a problem with, in a weird way, I don't have a problem with letting me down. You see what I'm saying? But it's a lot more difficult to knowing that I have all these people depending on me, whether it be my patients, whether it be my kids, my wife, etc. My community depending on me. It kind of makes me step up to the plate more. Because even it is weird. It's like sometimes we'll do for other people things that we won't even do for ourselves. You know what I mean? Or like sometimes we'll, not want to disappoint other people, but we'll allow ourselves to be disappointed. But I think I kind of strive when there's more responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a place. It's kind of more comfortable to be in that place. It's weird. I don't know how to explain it. I guess it just means that I was meant to carry this weight.
Absolutely.
And, as long as the good Lord continues to help me carry this weight, then I'll carry it.
He won't put nothing on you that you can't bear. You know that though.
Yeah.
And you also speak from a strengths perspective. Responsibility is definitely a high up strength for some people. And I never actually met someone who actually embodied it, right? A lot of stuff that, as you know, when you read in the medical field, it's text until you have a client or a patient who actually presents with this. You're like, okay, this is what it looks like. So I can hear your responsibility. I can hear that drive in you. And I definitely wish you all the success. So thank you so much for joining me on this couch and sharing your story. One last question for you.
Sure.
One thing I like to do on the podcast is reach back. And as we drive forward gung-ho about our dreams and our desires, and you being a doctor and hopefully a CEO of a hospital or a clinic, there's always somebody behind us that's striving to just make their next step. So when you think back to whatever point it is that you like to share some wisdom, whoever that kid is, whether it's yourself or somebody who was right next to you but just didn't even make it, what would be that one word of wisdom that you like to share?
That's a good point. Hey, I don't know if it could be one word.
No, not just,
phrase,
you know.
Yeah.
You know, when he says a word, he says a word.
Right. I think, man, there's so many lessons I've learned and so many lessons I'll continue to learn. I think putting God first is the most important thing. Once again, none of my life story, none of this stuff will be able to happen without God. So he gets the glory first and foremost. And then the other things is kind of something that you said earlier is what I tell myself actually a lot. It's know who you are and whose you are. That will be my advice. Keep God first, know who you are and whose you are. Because those three things, they're connected. Because if you know whose you are, see what I mean? Then you won't forget about putting him first. And then 2, based on who he is, you'll know who you are, and you won't forget that. So yeah, know who you are, know whose you are, and keep God first. Because at the end of the day, right? And I want to put this in context for everybody. I care about my career. I love my career, but my career doesn't define me. If I wasn't in medicine today, I would still be Martin Luther Campbell. Your career doesn't define you, okay? You bring who you are to your career, but don't let your career define you. You have some people, they lose their job, they lose their career, and they feel like they've lost everything because they put all their hope in that. You gotta have your hope in something bigger than that. So that way you can be grounded when stuff happens and that thing is taken away. Because we can't control that, right? There's a lot of things that are out of control. I could work like a dog. I could work till I start sweating blood, whatever. But at the end of the day, like, I can't control the outcome per se. But I can control, where I put my faith in, who I rely on, my mentality, my outlook. And so, like I said, keep God first, know who you are and know whose you are. And then everything else will, work out around that. So.
100%. Thank you so much. I really have enjoyed your story. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much for listening. So, Dr. Campbell,
yes.
If there's someone out there listening to your story and they resonate with you, they want to connect with you, or they just want to continue watching you thrive, how can they get connected with you?
Yes, you can get connected with me in several ways. You can connect with me by email, Martin Campbell 0125@gmail.com, and that's Campbell like the soup company, so with a P, CAMPBELL at gmail.com. Martin Campbell 0125@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's Dr.Campbell. Dr. Campbell. I really don't be on Twitter like that.
Okay.
And Facebook, I really just like to talk to my family and stuff like that. So yeah, so hit me up on Instagram, or you can message me through Gmail.
Okay. And we're gonna get his LinkedIn together because
yes,
he didn't say
my LinkedIn too. Yeah. I have a LinkedIn profile. I don't be on there as much as I used to, but we'll also get that information to you as well.
Absolutely. It'll all be in the description. So thank y'all so much for watching and listening. But until next time, peace out.
Peace.